Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Last Star. Wherever you are right now, whatever kind of day it has been, you made it here. And that is enough. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle. If you can, turn the lights down low or off completely. Because tonight, we are not staying here. Tonight we are going somewhere most people never think to go. Past the last planet, past the edge of the sun's reach, into the deep and patient dark where the real universe begins. Before we leave though, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are listening from right now and what time it is there. I read every single one. There is something I love about knowing that people from every corner of this small blue planet are drifting off to the same stars at the same moment. And if this is your first time here, welcome home. Hit subscribe so the next journey finds you. Now, are you ready? Let's go. Your day is done. Whatever it carried, the noise, the rushing, the small worries that stacked themselves one on top of another, you can set it down now. Tonight we are going somewhere extraordinary. Tonight we are going up. There is a place above you right now, not very far, as distances in space go, only about 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, which sounds like a lot until you learn that if you could drive a car straight upward at highway speed, you would arrive in under 4 hours. 4 hours. That is how thin the sky truly is. That is how close the edge of everything really sits above your head each night. And in that place, at this very moment, human beings are sleeping. Not in beds exactly, not the way you are lying now, with gravity pressing you gently into something soft. They are sleeping in sleeping bags attached to walls, their bodies floating slightly even inside the fabric, their arms drifting forward in front of them the way arms always drift in weightlessness, naturally, like the arms of someone falling very slowly through warm water. Up there the word down does not mean what it means here. Up there your body forgets the rules it has followed every moment of your life, and it simply floats. And somewhere in that floating, in that strange and gentle surrender to the absence of gravity, the crew of the International Space Station closes their eyes and waits for a sleep that comes differently than it comes for you. The International Space Station has been continuously occupied since November of the year 2000. That is more than 2 decades during which a human being has always been living above the world. Think about what was happening in your life in the year 2000, or imagine it if you were very young then, or not yet born. Think about everything that has changed since that year. The music, the technology, the world, and through all of it, quietly, without most people noticing, there has always been someone up there. Someone looking down at the curve of the Earth. Someone floating through a corridor no wider than a school hallway, doing science that will not be understood for another generation. The station itself is not what most people picture when they imagine a space station. It is not sleek. It is not silver and silent the way stations look in films. It is busy and complicated and surprisingly loud, filled with the constant hum of machines, fans and pumps and processors that never stop running because if they stopped the air, it would go bad and the temperature would swing from burning to freezing within hours. The ISS is less like a spacecraft and more like a very small, very pressurized town floating at the edge of the atmosphere, and the people inside it have learned to sleep through. That hum the way people who live near train tracks learn to sleep through the midnight freight. The station is roughly the size of an American football field when you count all of its solar panels stretched out on either side. But the living space, the pressurized modules where the crew actually lives and works and eats and breathes, is closer in volume to a 6-bedroom house. 6 people share that space for months at a time. They share a kitchen the size of a closet. They share 2 tiny bathrooms where the toilet works by suction rather than gravity, because without gravity water does not fall, it simply forms into perfect wobbling spheres and drifts away. They share a window, a spectacular, jaw-dropping, almost offensive window called the cupola, a domed observation module with 7 panes of glass pointing down at the entire Earth, where astronauts go when they need to remember why they came. And they go there often, more than you might expect. You would think that after weeks in orbit, the view might become ordinary, that the sight of the Earth turning slowly below you might become just another thing, the way the view from a window at home becomes invisible after a while, just background. But astronauts report again and again that the view never becomes ordinary, that they find themselves floating to the cupola at odd hours, pressing their faces close to the glass, watching the coast of Africa slide by or the lights of a city emerging from darkness, and feeling something they struggle to name. Not homesickness exactly, not pride exactly, something quieter, something closer to the feeling of recognizing a face in a crowd. The Earth looks like something they know, something they are made of, which of course they are. Every atom in an astronaut's body was forged in a star. Not this star, not the sun, but older stars. Stars that lived and died before the solar system existed. Stars whose explosions scattered carbon and oxygen and iron across the galaxy like seeds. Those seeds drifted for millions of years through the dark. Gravity gathered them. They became planets. They became oceans. They became eventually the water in your body and the iron in your blood and the calcium that holds your bones together. When an astronaut looks down at the Earth from 400 kilometers up, they are made of the same material they are looking at. The looking is a kind of reunion, but right now, most of them are not looking. Right now, on the night side of the station's strange orbit, the crew is trying to sleep. Sleep in space is a solved problem in some ways, and a permanent challenge in others. The solved part is simple enough. You have a sleeping bag, you have a small private module about the size of a phone booth, you have earplugs and a sleep mask, and you zip yourself in and let the hum of the station carry you under. The unsolved part is the light. The ISS orbits the Earth every 90 minutes. Every 90 minutes the station completes one full loop around the planet, which means every 90 minutes the crew experiences a sunrise, and then 45 minutes later a sunset, and then another sunrise. 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets in every single 24-hour day. 16 times the light blazes through the portholes. 16 times the sky outside goes from blazing orange to absolute black. The human body was not designed for 16 sunrises. The human body was designed for one, slow, gradual, accompanied by birdsong and the smell of morning, giving the brain 30 minutes to ease from darkness into light. Up there the sun simply snaps on like a switch, full and fierce and complete. So the crew wears sleep masks. They cover the portholes in their sleeping quarters with blackout covers. They take melatonin sometimes. They follow a schedule, lights on at a fixed time, lights off at a fixed time, to trick the brain into believing that the rules still apply, that there is still a morning and an evening, even while outside the window the sun rises and sets once every hour and a half. And somehow, most of the time, it works. The brain adapts. The body finds its rhythm inside the rhythm that has been constructed for it, the artificial day stitched carefully together by flight surgeons on the ground whose whole job is making sure the people up there can sleep deeply enough to do good science tomorrow. The science is the reason for all of it, not the adventure, not the spectacle, not the view from the cupola, though these things are real and they matter. The reason 6 human beings are living above the world at this exact moment is science. Specifically, the science of what happens to a human body when you take gravity away. Because here is something strange and worth sitting with. Gravity is not just the thing that holds your coffee in your cup. Gravity is a force your entire body has been fighting since the moment you were born. Every bone in your body is dense, partly because of gravity. Because your skeleton has spent your entire life bearing your weight, responding to that constant downward pressure. By building calcium into itself, by staying strong, your heart is a particular shape and size, partly because of the work it has to do pumping blood upward against gravity, up from your legs to your brain. Your inner ear, the tiny structure deep inside your skull that tells you which way is up, it exists entirely to navigate a world where up and down are real, fixed, permanent. Directions. Take gravity away, and all of that changes. The bones stop needing to be dense and begin, slowly, to thin. The heart changes shape because the blood pressure is different. In microgravity, fluids shift toward the upper body, and astronauts on their first days in orbit often feel as though they have a permanent head cold, their sinuses full, and their faces slightly puffy from the extra fluid that has migrated north. The inner ear spins into confusion. About 70% of astronauts experience space sickness in their first days, nausea, disorientation, the feeling of standing at the edge of something very large, as the vestibular system tries to recalibrate for a world where the floor is also the ceiling. And yet they adapt. Within a week, most of them feel fine. Within 2 weeks, most of them feel free. There is a word that astronauts use more than any other word to describe living in microgravity. The word is effortless, not weightless, though that is accurate. Effortless, the feeling that a body long accustomed to hauling itself through the world suddenly does not have to haul anymore. You push off from a wall and you glide. You do not walk. Walking requires gravity to keep your feet on the floor. You swim through the air, pulling yourself along handrails, executing slow, graceful somersaults in the middle of a module when the mood strikes you, which apparently it often does. Astronauts report doing backflips just because they can, just because the body, freed from the press of gravity, wants to move in directions it never could before. And something else happens in that freedom, something quieter and harder to measure. Many astronauts describe a feeling, in the weeks after adaptation, of being more present, more aware of their own bodies, more aware of silence, as if the constant low-level effort of existing on Earth, of holding yourself upright, of balancing, of carrying your own weight through the world, had been creating a kind of noise inside them that they had never noticed until it stopped. The station passes over your part of the world several times a day. Most people never look up. Most people are looking at screens, or at the road, or at each other, or at their own hands. The station is bright enough on a clear night to see with the naked eye. It moves steadily and silently across the sky. No blinking, no drifting, just a point of light moving. With quiet determination from one horizon to the other, taking about 6 minutes to cross the whole sky and then vanishing into the dark. 6 minutes. That is how long you might have watched it tonight, had you been outside, had you looked up at exactly the right moment. 6 minutes during which someone up there was doing an experiment, or eating dinner from a pouch, or floating to the cupola to look down at the light spreading across the continent below. The experiments are relentless. That is the word for them. Relentless. On any given day aboard the ISS, the crew is running somewhere between 200 and 300 separate scientific investigations. Not all of them dramatic. Most of them are not dramatic. Most of them are careful, repetitive, patient work, measuring something 100 times to see if it is always the same, or always slightly different, or changes in a pattern. That will only become visible after months of measurement. Science on the IS is not glamorous science. It is the kind of science that does not give you answers for years, and even then the answers are quiet and precise rather than spectacular. The kind of answers that say, here is something small and exact that we did not know before, and from that small exact thing we can build something we could not build before. Some of the science is biological. Cells behave differently in microgravity. They grow in 3 dimensions rather than the flat sheets they form in Earth-based labs, which means they form shapes closer to the way. They actually grow inside a living body. Scientists studying cancer have been sending cell cultures to the station for years, watching how tumours develop in microgravity, hoping to understand the structure of growth in a way that gravity makes difficult to see from below. Plants are being grown in special chambers, lettuce, radishes, chili peppers, all of which have been successfully cultivated in orbit, all of which have been eaten by astronauts, who grew them with their own hands. There is something quietly moving about a plant grown in space, something that insists on life in a place designed to end it. Some of the science is physical, fluid dynamics, the behaviour of liquids and flames, the way metal solidifies when there is no gravity to pull impurities downward as it cools. These things are different in orbit in ways that have already changed how we make materials on Earth. A flame in microgravity is a perfect sphere. On Earth, flames are teardrop-shaped because convection, the rising of hot air, pulls them upward. In orbit there is no up for the hot air to go, so the flame simply blooms outward in every direction equally, a small round star, and burns cooler and slower and more completely than any flame you have ever seen. A small round star. 400 kilometers above your head, someone has watched a flame burn in a sphere and thought about the sun, and just beyond the biology labs, past the fluid physics experiments and the material science chambers and the plant growth modules, there is an instrument that has been monitoring Earth's atmosphere for years, quietly, without fanfare, watching the chemistry of the air from above in ways that no ground-based instrument can replicate. What it has been recording about certain high-altitude cloud formations was only recently shared with the scientific community, and the researchers who read the data went very quiet for a while before they said anything at all. Tonight the station is passing over an ocean. From the cupola, if anyone is awake to look, the water below is dark and enormous, and the cloud systems over it are lit faintly from within by lightning that makes no sound up. Here, just light, pulsing, spreading, silent as thought. Astronauts call this phenomenon elves and sprites. Not poetic nicknames. Actual scientific designations. Sprites are red electrical discharges that shoot upward from the tops of thunderclouds toward the ionosphere, lasting only milliseconds, invisible from the ground because you would have to be above the clouds to see them. Elves are rings of light that expand outward from where a lightning bolt strikes, spreading in a flat circle across the upper atmosphere at the speed of light, there and gone, before the next heartbeat. From the ground you see the lightning and hear the thunder and feel the rain. From the station you see elves and sprites, the lightning's secret upper half, the part it sends towards space rather than toward the ground, as if each storm is reaching in both directions at once. The crew sleeps through most of this. They have learned to sleep through the elves and the sprites and the 16 daily sunrises and the hum of the machines and the occasional thump of a micrometeor hitting thee. shielding outside, a sound one astronaut described as someone knocking on the outside of a car door, startling but not alarming, just a reminder that the station is moving. Through a solar system full of small, fast things, the shielding is called Whipple shielding, after Fred Whipple, the astronomer who designed it. It works by sacrificing its outer layer, a thin bumper plate spaced away from the main hull. When a small particle hits the outer plate, the impact vaporizes both the particle and the plate material, spreading the energy over a larger area before it can reach thee. Pressurized interior. The station has been hit thousands of times. The pockmarks are visible in photographs taken during spacewalks, little craters in the outer skin, each one a small story of something that travelled for millions of miles. Through the dark and arrived here, at this improbable address, where 6 people were trying to sleep. The spacewalks themselves are one of the stranger experiences that human beings have ever had access to. You go through a hatch. You are outside. There is nothing between you and the universe except a suit. A suit that is essentially a one-person spacecraft, pressurized and temperature controlled and fed with oxygen with a visor coated in a thin layer of gold to filter the unfiltered sunlight that in space is not gentle, not golden, not the warm light that comes through your window in the morning. It is hard and white and would blind you in seconds without protection. And then you work. You fix things, install things, run cables, replace equipment. You work for 6 or 7 or sometimes 8 hours. You work with gloves so thick that your hands lose fine motor control, and every task that would take 30 seconds with bare hands can take 20 minutes with the gloves on. You work while the earth turns below you and the sun rises and sets over your shoulder every 90 minutes, and the stars, when you are on the night side, are so many and so bright that they do not look like what you grew up calling stars. They look like something the word stars was invented to approximate, but never quite captured. Astronauts who have done spacewalks say the stars do not twinkle out there. On Earth the stars twinkle because their light is passing through the atmosphere, through all that moving air with its different temperatures and densities, each layer bending. The light slightly, making it shimmer and dance. From outside the atmosphere, the stars are steady, fixed, ancient. They hold their light like something decided, something that does not waver. And the astronaut, hanging by a tether to the outside of the station, surrounded by that steady ancient light, has this feeling, almost everyone describes it, of being very small and very safe at the same time. Very small and very safe. Not a contradiction, not even a paradox once you feel it. The smallness and the safety arrive together, 2 sides of the same recognition, which is this: you are a tiny biological creature floating above a blue planet in an incomprehensibly large universe, and the universe has no particular feelings about this either way, and somehow that, the absence of judgment, the absolute indifference of all, that space feels like rest, like the specific rest that only comes when something has stopped expecting anything from you. The first human being to walk in space was Alexei Leonov, a Soviet cosmonaut, on the 18th of March 1965. His spacewalk lasted 12 minutes. When he tried to return through the hatch, his suit had ballooned outward from the pressure difference, and he could not fit through the opening. He had to bleed some of the air out of his suit, reduce the pressure, take the risk, to make himself small enough to get back inside. Nobody on the ground knew this was happening. He solved the problem himself, in the quiet of the airlock, in a suit slowly losing pressure, with the earth below him and the hatch barely large enough, and he got back inside. and did not tell the full story until many years later. 12 minutes. And it contained all of that. Now the crews train for years before a spacewalk. They practice in the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory in Houston, a tank of water so large it holds a full-scale mock-up of the ISS, where suited astronauts spend hours underwater, rehearsing every motion they will make in orbit. Water is not weightlessness, there is still drag, still resistance, but it is close enough to teach the body how to move without up and down. Close enough to rehearse, and after all that rehearsal, after all those years of training, they go outside and say, "Nothing prepared me for this." The stars above. The Earth below, the station beside them, enormous and strange from the outside, its gold foil panels catching the sunlight and throwing it back. The silence that is not quite silence. You can hear your own breathing inside the helmet, the hiss of the oxygen system, the faint sound of your heart, but everything beyond. That is a silence so complete it has a texture, like something you could press your hand into and feel it give. As you breathe right now, somewhere up in that dark, someone is pulling themselves hand over hand along a railing on the outside of a station that cost $150 billion to build, doing work that needed to be done, while 14 countries on the planet below go about their days without thinking about them at all. The breath inside the helmet. The stars that do not waver, the Earth, always the Earth, hanging there below like the thing the whole journey was about from the beginning. Inside, the sleeping crew does not know what the night shift is seeing. They are under their sleep masks in their small, quiet modules, arms floating gently forward, dreams arriving slowly through the hum and the warmth of the recycled air. The air they breathe was scrubbed of carbon dioxide by a system that uses lithium hydroxide to absorb it, the same basic chemistry that submarines have used for decades. The same principle that keeps a sealed space breathable when there is nowhere for the bad air to go. The oxygen they breathe is generated by a process called electrolysis, running electricity through water to split it into hydrogen and oxygen, releasing the oxygen into the cabin and venting the hydrogen away. They breathe water in a sense. They breathe water that has been separated into its elements and given back to them in the form of air. Everything on the station is a cycle. The water is reclaimed from humidity in the air, from urine, from wherever it can be recovered, and cleaned and returned to use. The urine processor is a matter of engineering pride up there. It recovers 93% of the water in urine and returns it to the drinking water system, which station commanders have been at pains to explain to the public is not as alarming as it sounds, because by the time that water has been through the filtration system, it is cleaner than most municipal tap water on Earth. Today's coffee is tomorrow's coffee, as the saying goes on the station, with the particular humour of people who have made their peace with everything. The food comes on resupply ships. Every few months a cargo vehicle docks with the station. These days it might be a Northrop Grumman Cygnus, or a SpaceX Dragon, or a Russian Progress carrying fresh food. Alongside equipment and experiments and replacement parts, the fresh food is celebrated. The fresh fruit especially. One astronaut wrote at length about eating an orange on the station, how after weeks of packaged food the smell of it when she peeled it filled the entire module, and two. Crewmates drifted over without being asked, drawn by something older than thought, drawn by the smell of something alive. An orange, 400 kilometres up, a small round thing of colour and juice, and the distilled work of a tree growing in sunshine somewhere below, passed between gloved hands in a tin corridor while the planet turned outside the window. The resupply missions are also when mail arrives. Actual physical letters sent from families who have been told the dimensions of the bag available on the cargo manifest and who have cut photographs and folded notes to fit. Exactly. Who have thought carefully about what to send when weight and volume are precious and every cubic centimetre was argued over by engineers. Letters. Photographs of children who have grown since the last launch. Drawings from kids who have written to the astronaut with their best handwriting and a drawing of a rocket. These things arrive and are read privately and are attached to walls with Velcro. And they stay there for the whole mission, a gallery of the world below, filling the margins of the science. There is a guitar on the station. There has been a guitar on the station for years, passed from crew to crew, played in the evenings after the work is done. It floats gently against its restraint. Astronauts who play have been filmed up there drifting slightly while they play, the guitar not quite in their laps, because there are no laps in microgravity, just held in front. Of them, suspended in air, the music going nowhere because sound does not leave a sealed module, just moves around inside it and comes back. Music in a tin can at the edge of the world. The sound returning, the night outside going on forever in every direction except down, and down being home, the blue planet turning its slow turn, holding everything they love in its atmosphere. The way the atmosphere holds the weather, invisibly, completely, without effort, without end. The night shift is finishing their work. The day crew will wake in a few hours, the station will continue its loop. The sun will rise again through the porthole covers, and the sleep masks will do their patient work, and somewhere in the cupola the light will be extraordinary and no one will. Be there to see it for a little while, just the glass and the light and the earth below, doing what the earth does, which is turn and turn and turn, without hurrying, without pause. The way things turn when they have been turning for 4.5 billion years and have learned that there is no reason to stop. The station crosses the terminator line, the boundary between the day side and the night side of the Earth, and for a moment it is in both worlds at once. Sunlight on one side of the hull, darkness on the other. The solar panels catching the last of the light and storing it in the batteries that will power everything through the 45 minutes of orbital night. The station does not coast in the dark. It does not slow down. It carries its light with it, the way certain deep-sea creatures carry light, from within, because the dark outside is complete and the life inside requires it. Below, in the ocean, a storm is building. You can see it from the cupola as a smear of white, a slow spiral, barely organised yet, still deciding what it wants to become. In a day, it may be nothing. In a day, it may be enormous. From up here, you cannot feel its wind or its rain, or the pressure drop that animals feel before a storm arrives. From up here, it is simply a shape, a turning. Something the atmosphere is doing, because the atmosphere is always doing something, always moving heat from one place to another, always trying to find a balance it never quite reaches. The Earth's atmosphere is always trying to find a balance it never quite reaches. That is essentially what weather is. A planet trying to even out, warm air rising in the tropics, cold air sinking at the poles, the rotation of the Earth bending all of that moving air sideways into the great spiral patterns, trade winds, jet. Streams, the Coriolis effect, that make the weather you experience below feel chaotic but are, from above, deeply patterned, deeply logical. The chaos is only visible from inside it. From outside it is a kind of slow, enormous breathing. The station flies through the upper reaches of the thermosphere. Not quite space, not in the clean absolute sense, because there are still molecules up here, still traces of atmosphere, still enough gas that over time the station loses altitude from the drag of even these faint collisions, and must periodically fire its engines to climb back up. It is boosted roughly once a month, a gentle burn that takes it back to its operational altitude and keeps it from drifting downward in an ever-tightening spiral that would end. Eventually, in the atmosphere's thickening grip, everything in low Earth orbit is falling. That is the correct way to understand an orbit, and it changes the way the whole thing feels once you know it. The station is not floating above the Earth. It is falling toward the Earth, constantly, continuously, every second, but it is also moving sideways so fast that by the time it has fallen a certain distance, the Earth's surface has curved away beneath it by exactly that same distance. It falls, and the Earth curves away, and so it falls, and the Earth curves away perpetually, a chase that never ends because the geometry is perfect. An orbit is a fall that keeps missing. 7.7 kilometers per second. That is how fast the station is moving sideways to keep the fall from landing. 7.7 kilometers every second. Faster than a rifle bullet. Faster than most things your mind has a reference for. At that speed, a journey from Lahore to London would take less than 90 seconds. The station covers that distance before you can properly think about it. It covers the width of the Pacific Ocean in about 12 minutes. It wraps the entire planet in ninety. The sleeping crew does not feel this speed. Speed without acceleration feels like nothing. The same reason you do not feel the Earth moving beneath you as it orbits the Sun at 30 kilometers per second, which is even. Faster, incomprehensibly faster, and yet entirely invisible to your senses. We are all travelling at extraordinary speeds through the dark, and most of the time the only reason we know it is because someone sat down with mathematics and worked it out. The mathematics of orbital mechanics is one of the most elegant things human beings have ever written. It begins with Newton, who looked at the moon and understood, in a genuine flash of insight that he described as the most productive period of his intellectual life, that the moon is simply a falling object. The same force that drops an apple from a tree is the force that keeps the moon in its orbit. Gravity does not change, it just gets weaker with distance, weaker by the square of the distance, which means if you go twice as far from Earth you feel a quarter of the gravity, and if you go 10 times. As far you feel 1/100th, and at the moon's distance, 400,000 kilometers out, gravity has fallen to about 1/3000th of what you feel standing on. The ground, but it is still there, still reaching. Still the same force that holds your cup on the table and keeps the station from flying off into interplanetary space. Newton wrote his equations, and from them you can calculate where anything will be at any future moment, where the station will be tomorrow morning, where the moon will be in a century, where a spacecraft launched today will intercept a target moving at a different speed in a different orbit years from now. It works. It has always worked. When Voyager 1 was launched in 1977, and is now, as of this year, more than 23 billion kilometers from Earth, still moving, still transmitting, still reachable by radio signals that take 22 hours to arrive, it is exactly where Newton's equations predicted it would be. A pencil and paper calculation, made in the 17th century, is still correct at a distance of 23 billion kilometers. Something about that feels important to sit with for a moment. The universe is not random. It is not arbitrary. It follows rules. Rules that are the same everywhere. Rules that apply whether you're in a laboratory in England, or on the edge of the solar system, or in a distant galaxy whose light takes millions of years to reach us. The rules do not change with distance. They do not change with time. They are the same rules in the same form in every direction you can point, and the fact that we have found them, that small biological creatures on a small wet planet have, managed to reverse engineer the operating system of the universe, is perhaps the strangest and most quietly magnificent thing our species has ever done. In the material science module, an experiment has been running undisturbed for 11 days. It involves a metal alloy being slowly solidified in a specially designed furnace, the crystals forming at a rate carefully controlled by the furnace's temperature gradient. On Earth, as metal solidifies, the denser components sink and the lighter ones rise, gravity sorting the mixture the way gravity sorts everything, always pulling the heavier. Toward the bottom, always stratifying, always creating gradients and layers. The alloys you find on Earth are shaped by this sorting. The crystal structures inside them are partly determined by which way gravity was pulling as they formed. In microgravity, the sorting does not happen. The components stay distributed. The crystals form differently, more evenly, more uniformly, in patterns that are harder to achieve in a gravity-fed furnace on the ground. The materials that come out of microgravity solidification experiments have properties that Earth-made alloys sometimes cannot match. Stronger in particular ways. More consistent, less prone to the small internal flaws that gravity-driven separation can create. Turbine blades in jet engines. Medical implants, electronic components that require metal purity beyond what Earth manufacturing can reliably achieve. The research being done in that small furnace, 11 days in the quiet of a sleeping station, is research that will eventually change what things are made of on the ground. Years from now, something will be built from a material whose properties were discovered up here, and the person using it will not know, will never need to know, will simply benefit from the fact that someone spent 11 days watching metal cool in a place where gravity could not interfere. The station passes over the Terminator again. Dawn now, from the orbital perspective, the sun rising for the 12th time in this single day, the panels rotating on their massive truss to track it. The batteries beginning. To discharge less as the solar input returns, the automated systems handle all of this without waking anyone. The station is full of systems that manage themselves. Thermal control systems that pump ammonia through external radiator panels to shed the heat generated by all the equipment. Inside, attitude control systems that use spinning gyroscopes called control moment gyroscopes to maintain the station's orientation without burning fuel. Power management. Systems that balance the load between the solar arrays and the batteries and the various modules drawing from the grid. The station is, in many ways, more automatic than it appears. The crew is essential for the science, for the repairs that always come, for the spacewalks, for the 1,000 small decisions that the automatic systems cannot make. But the machine itself has been designed to keep running through the night, to keep the air clean and the temperature stable and the orbit maintained, and the data flowing to the ground even while everyone inside it sleeps. Ground control is always awake. In Houston and in Moscow and in Munich and in Tsukuba, Japan, flight controllers sit at consoles and watch the station's telemetry, thousands of data points streaming down from orbit, measurements of temperature and pressure and power, and oxygen levels and structural strain, all arriving continuously, all being monitored by people whose job is to notice the number that is slightly different from what it should be, and to know what that means. Most nights nothing requires attention. Most nights the data streams are clean, and the system's nominal, and the controllers watch and wait, and drink coffee and talk quietly, and the station loops overhead in its perfect. Falling orbit, carrying its sleeping crew, doing its slow patient work. But every person in that room knows, has always known, that the number that matters will not announce itself. It will simply appear, slightly different, in a row of numbers that were the same yesterday, and the controller who notices it first will lean forward and say something quiet to the person beside them, and that will be the beginning of something that demands their full attention. It has happened before. It will happen again. The station has faced ammonia leaks and computer failures and a fire and a near collision with debris, and every time the crews and the controllers on the ground have worked through it together, step by step, problem by problem, and the station has kept flying. There is a phrase that NASA uses: anomaly. Not emergency. Not crisis. Anomaly. An anomaly is something that does not match the model, something requiring investigation, a divergence from expectation. The language is deliberate. An anomaly is a puzzle. Puzzles have solutions. Language shapes the mind that has to solve the problem, and the mind that approaches a crisis as a puzzle solves it better than the mind that approaches it as a catastrophe. The sleeping crew does not know about anomalies tonight. Tonight there are none. Tonight the data streams are clean and the systems are nominal, and the storm below is still deciding what it wants to become, and the stars outside the hull are steady and ancient, and indifferent in the best possible way. Indifferent like deep water is indifferent. Like a forest at night is indifferent. Not hostile. Not warm. Simply there, simply continuing, simply doing what it does regardless of whether you are watching, and that continuity, the certainty of it, the absolute reliability of the stars being there and the orbit being maintained and the planet turning below is its own kind of comfort. The universe is not going to surprise you tonight. The physics are stable. The laws hold. Everything that is supposed to continue will continue. There is a window in the Russian segment of the station, a small porthole, circular, scratched from years of use, looking out at an angle that catches the Earth on one side and the pure black of space on the other. No one is sleeping near it right now. It is just open, the porthole, looking at whatever is there, the scratched glass slightly softening the edge of the Earth's curve, the stars beyond it doing what they do. Once an astronaut described looking through that porthole at 3 in the morning station time, which is an arbitrary designation, a human convention, imposed on a place that has no morning, and seeing the southern lights, the aurora australis. Curtains of green and red light shifting and folding across the upper atmosphere below, the product of solar particles colliding with the air at the poles, energy transformed. Into colour, physics becoming beauty without meaning to. She watched for 20 minutes. She did not wake anyone. She held it alone in the dark, the green light moving below her, the stars above, the station humming its constant hum, and she thought about her daughter at home asleep in a bed with a nightlight, and she thought about how the nightlight and the aurora were both the same thing. Light in the dark. Light that says something is here, something is running, something is keeping watch. The aurora fades as the station moves out of range. The porthole shows only stars again. The sleeping module is quiet. The hum of the fans is even and low. Someone shifts inside their sleeping bag, arms adjusting, a small unconscious motion, and then is still. Outside, the Earth keeps turning. The storm in the ocean has found its shape and is beginning to organise, its arms reaching outward, its centre dropping in pressure, the atmosphere feeding it moisture and warmth, from the sea below. It will be named tomorrow, given a name by the meteorologists who watch it from below and from the satellites above and from the instruments on the station, all watching the same thing from different angles, all contributing to the understanding of what the air is doing and why. The station moves on. The storm falls away behind it. Ahead, the coast of a continent is coming into view, lit on the eastern edge by a sunrise that is just beginning, the first thin line of orange above the horizon that from orbit is not a horizon at all, but a curve, the visible curve of the Earth, the proof of the planet's roundness that you can see with your own eyes from 400 kilometers up. The thing that ancient sailors intuited by watching ships disappear over the edge of the sea hull first, and that Eratosthenes calculated from the angle of shadows in 2 Egyptian cities more than 2,000 years ago. Eratosthenes, a man with a stick and a shadow and a question, working in a library in Alexandria, measuring the angle of the sun at noon in Alexandria, and comparing it with reports that at the same moment in Syene, to the south, the sun was directly overhead and cast no shadow at all. From that difference in angles, about 7 degrees, he calculated the circumference of the entire Earth. He was off by less than 2%. 2%. With a stick and a shadow and a question, and a mind that looked at something ordinary and asked why. Every person who has ever looked up at the sky and wondered is part of the same long line of asking. The sailors who navigated by stars they named. The astronomers who mapped the planets and found the ones that were missing from the math. The engineers who drew the first diagrams of rockets on paper and knew they were drawing something that did not exist yet and that they would spend their careers making real. The astronauts asleep right now above your head, who filled out the application and trained for years and left everything familiar and rode a column of fire into the dark because they wanted to see what was up here, wanted to know what could be learned, wanted to be part of the line that reaches from Eratosthenes and his stick all the way to a sleeping bag attached to a wall 400 kilometers above the ground. The line is long, the line is still going. Whatever it reaches next, it will be because someone asked why, and someone else tried to answer, and the answer opened into another question, and the question opened into another answer, the way the universe always does, not closing, not finishing, but opening, always opening, one thing leading to the next, the way one breath leads to the next, the way one orbit leads to the next, the way tonight leads to tomorrow, and tomorrow leads to whatever comes after that, which has not been named yet, which is still out there, waiting in the dark between the stars, patient as everything that has been waiting longer than we have been here to wonder about it. The station completes another loop. The crew breathes in their sleeping bags. The storm below turns. The stars hold their light. The porthole in the Russian segment looks out at the dark, and the dark looks back, and neither of them blinks. And this is what the universe is like at this hour, vast and quiet and full of things still becoming. The becoming never stops. That is the thing about the universe that takes the longest to truly absorb, not its size, not its age, not the incomprehensible distances between things, but the fact that it has never once paused, not for a single Planck moment, which is the smallest unit of time that physics acknowledges, a span so brief that 10 million trillion of them fit inside a single second. Not even for that. The universe has been in continuous motion, continuous transformation, continuous becoming since the first fraction of the first second after the beginning, and it has not rested. Since, and it will not rest, and somehow that, the perpetual motion of everything, is not exhausting to think about. It is the opposite. It is the most restful thing there is, because it means the work of existing is not yours alone. The universe has been doing it for 13.8 billion years without your help, and it will continue without your help tonight, and you can simply be inside it, still, and small and carried. The crew of the station is deep in their sleep now. The first 2 or 3 hours have passed, the light sleep of early night, the brief dreams that do not hold, and they have moved into the deeper architecture of rest. The slow, wave sleep where the brain does its real work, consolidating the day's information, moving memories from short-term storage into the longer structures where they will be kept. The brain during deep sleep is not quiet. It is extraordinarily active, running a kind of internal maintenance that cannot happen while you are awake, clearing out the metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours, strengthening the neural pathways that matter and allowing the ones that do not to fade. Sleep is not the absence of brain activity. Sleep is a different kind of brain activity, one that the waking brain cannot do, one that is just as essential as anything that happens in the light. Up here, that maintenance runs the same as it does below. The brain does not know it is in orbit. The brain knows only that the body is at rest, that the eyes are closed, that the muscles have released their tone. Even in microgravity, the muscles relax during sleep. The hands uncurl, the jaw loosens, the perpetual small tensions of wakefulness dissolve, and so it begins its work. The slow waves roll through the cortex. The hippocampus replays the day in compressed form, sending fragments to the prefrontal cortex for storage. The glymphatic system opens, a network of channels around the brain's blood vessels that expands during sleep and allows cerebrospinal fluid to flush through the brain tissue, washing away the proteins and metabolic byproducts that would, if allowed to accumulate, cause damage over time. You are doing this right now. The same slow waves, the same maintenance, the same ancient cleaning process that your brain has been running every night since before you were born, since before your species had a word for sleep, since before there was a species at all, since the first complex nervous systems evolved and discovered 400 million years ago that rest was not optional, that the machine required downtime, that the price of consciousness was this nightly surrender to the dark. 400 million years of sleep. Every creature with a nervous system complex enough to need it has been sleeping since the Devonian period, when the first vertebrates were just beginning to explore the land. Fish sleep, birds sleep, some of them with half their brain at a time, the other half staying alert so that they can sleep while flying, which is one of the more extraordinary things biology has managed to arrange. Dolphins sleep the same way. The brain divided, half dreaming, half watching. The body moving through the water or the air on autopilot while the self goes somewhere else entirely. The somewhere else of dreams. No one fully understands dreams. Not yet. There are theories, the activation synthesis hypothesis, which suggests that dreams are the brain's attempt to make narrative sense of random neural firing during REM sleep. The threat simulation theory, which suggests that dreams evolved as a safe way to rehearse dangerous situations, a flight simulator for the crises of waking life, the memory. Consolidation view, which sees dreaming as part of the process of sorting and storing experience. All of these are probably partly right. None of them fully accounts for why dreams feel the way they feel, why they have the specific texture of importance, why they so often feel like they are about something even. When, on waking, you cannot say what, why certain dreams stay with you for years while the events of real days fade in hours. An astronaut dreaming on the station might dream of Earth. Many of them report this. Ordinary Earth dreams, walking on grass, driving a car, feeling rain. The sensations that microgravity takes away, weight, texture underfoot, the feeling of wind on skin. The body remembers these things even when the mind is occupied with experiments and EVA preparations and orbital mechanics. The body keeps a record of the sensations it was built for, and in sleep revisits them. The feet dream of ground even when they have not touched ground in months. This is not sadness. The astronauts do not describe it as sadness. They describe it as a kind of richness. The way absence can make something vivid that presence made invisible. You do not think about the feeling of grass under your feet while you are walking on it. You think about it in a sleeping bag on a space station with the Earth 400 kilometers below, and it is suddenly the most specific and beautiful sensation you have ever known. The Earth is doing something extraordinary right now, as it always is. The magnetosphere, the invisible magnetic field generated by the churning liquid iron in the planet's outer core, is deflecting the solar wind. The solar wind is a stream of charged particles constantly flowing outward from the Sun at speeds between 400 and 800 kilometers per second, a continuous, invisible hurricane of plasma that, without the magnetosphere, would strip the atmosphere from the Earth the way it stripped the atmosphere from Mars billions of years ago. Mars lost its magnetic field early in its history, and the solar wind came, and the atmosphere went, and the water went with it, and Mars became the cold red desert it is today. Earth kept its field, the core kept churning, the iron kept moving in its vast, slow convections, driven by heat left over from the planet's formation and by the slow crystallization of the inner core as it gradually solidifies from the outside in. A process that is still ongoing, the inner core still growing, 1 millimeter per year, adding a thin shell of solid iron to its surface as the planet slowly cools from the inside. In 1 billion years the core will be more solid. The convections will slow, the magnetic field will weaken, the solar wind will find it easier to reach the atmosphere. But not tonight. Tonight the field holds. Tonight the magnetosphere bows outward on the sun-facing side, compressed by the solar wind, and stretches out into a long tail on the night side, like a teardrop shape, surrounding the planet, and the charged particles from the sun stream around it, deflected, harmless, flowing past in their invisible river while the atmosphere below continues to hold the air and the water and the warmth that make life possible. The station orbits inside the magnetosphere. It is protected too, though not perfectly. The radiation environment in low Earth orbit is significantly higher than on the ground, and over the course of a long mission, an astronaut accumulates a radiation dose that would concern a doctor if it were received all at once in a hospital, but spread over months, monitored carefully, managed with shielding in the sleeping quarters, thicker walls around the cabins than anywhere else on the station. It is within acceptable limits. The body repairs most radiation damage. The cells that are hit replace themselves. The damage that accumulates is real but gradual, and the science gained from the mission is judged worth the cost by the people who make that choice, which is the astronauts themselves. They sign the waivers. They read the literature. They understand the numbers. And then they go anyway, because the alternative, staying below, staying safe, learning only what can be learned from down here, is its own kind of cost. There are things that can only be discovered by going. There have always been things that can only be discovered by going. Magellan's crew circling the Earth in the 16th century did not know the Pacific was as wide as it was. They ran out of food. They ate the leather off the ship's rigging, soaked it in seawater to make it chewable. They lost most of the fleet and most of the men. And they came back with knowledge that changed the map of the world, the actual physical map, the way humanity understood the shape of the planet it lived on. The cost was paid, the knowledge was earned. The map was different afterward. The map is always different afterward. That is what exploration does. It does not just add names to blank spaces, it changes the shape of what you thought you knew, reveals that the blank space was where the most important things were waiting, that what looked like nothing from a distance was, up close, an entire continent of specifics. In the Life Sciences module, an experiment is monitoring the growth of bacteria in microgravity. Not dangerous bacteria, harmless strains, carefully chosen, selected for what they can teach. In microgravity, bacteria behave differently. Some strains become more virulent, more capable of causing infection under the conditions of spaceflight for reasons that are not yet completely understood but appear to. Involve changes in gene expression triggered by the stress of the environment. Understanding why this happens, understanding the mechanism, could lead to new ways of controlling bacterial behavior in medical contexts on Earth. The bacteria do not know they are being studied. They are simply doing what bacteria do, dividing, adapting, responding to their environment with the mindless precision of 3.5 billion years of evolution. 3.5 billion years. Life on Earth began approximately that long ago. Single-celled organisms in the shallow oceans of a young planet, metabolizing, dividing, changing. Every living thing on Earth today is descended from those first cells. Every bacterium in that module, every cell in the sleeping astronauts' bodies, every tree and fish and bird and slow-growing lichen on the side of a cold mountain, all of it traces back to the same origin, the same moment when chemistry crossed a threshold and became biology, when molecules began doing something that no one has yet fully explained, replicating themselves, consuming energy, maintaining order in a universe that tends toward disorder. Life is the most improbable thing in the universe. Or it is inevitable. Scientists disagree, which means they do not yet know, which means the question is still open, which means the answer is still out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered by someone who asks the right question at the right moment with the right tools. The right tools are one of the things the station provides. Instruments calibrated for conditions that cannot be replicated on the ground, a vantage point that no ground-based observatory can match for certain observations. A laboratory where the variable of gravity has been removed, the way a controlled experiment removes variables one by one until the thing being studied is isolated, clarified, seen clearly for what it is without the noise of everything else. The station is a controlled experiment in what humans can do when the usual rules are suspended. Not just the physics, the gravity, the weather, the day and night, but the social rules, the ordinary rhythms, the assumptions about what a day looks like and what a life requires. The astronauts who come back changed are changed partly by the view and partly by the science, but partly also by the experience of living so completely outside the context that shaped them, of discovering that the context is not who they are, that who they are is something smaller and more portable than they thought, something that fits in a sleeping bag on a wall, in a module no bigger than a closet, and still dreams. The station passes over the Himalayas. Even from orbit, the mountains are visible as a wrinkle, a thickening of the land, the collision of two tectonic plates frozen in slow motion into the highest ground on Earth. The Himalayas are still rising. A few millimeters per year, the Indian plate still pressing northward into the Eurasian plate, the crust buckling upward, the mountains growing imperceptibly. In 10 million years they will be higher. In 100 million years the continents will be somewhere else entirely, arranged in configurations that no one alive today can fully predict, because the models of plate. Tectonics can project trends, but the details are beyond calculation at that range. The Earth is not fixed. Nothing about the planet that seems permanent is permanent at the timescale of geology. The oceans have been in different places. The poles have reversed, the magnetic North Pole and the magnetic South Pole have swapped positions hundreds of times over Earth's history, the field weakening and reorganizing. The compasses of any compass using creatures of the time suddenly pointing the wrong way. The atmosphere has been different. More oxygen once, when the first photosynthesizing organisms flooded the air with a gas that was toxic to most life then existing. An extinction event caused by too much of what we now breathe. The sun has been different, younger and cooler when life began, steadily brightening, a fraction of a percent per 100 million years, slowly and inevitably increasing its output until, in about 1 billion years, it will be bright enough and hot enough to begin evaporating Earth's oceans. 1 billion years. The number is large enough to be meaningless until you try to put something inside it. 1 billion years ago, the most complex life on Earth was still single-celled. There were no animals, no plants, no eyes to see with or ears to hear with or minds to wonder with. Just chemistry, patient and slow, working out possibilities in the dark water, building towards something it did not know was coming, which is what the universe does, builds. Toward things it does not know are coming, follows its rules, and arrives at outcomes that no one predicted, because no one was there to predict. We are one of those outcomes. Creatures made of stars, living on a rock circling a star, looking up at the other stars and asking where we came from and where we are going. The question is the most human thing there is. The question is older than language. It is in the bones of every ancient burial site where someone placed flowers with the body, which is a gesture that says, we believe something comes next. We believe this is not all there is. We believe the darkness is not the end. The station moves over the Indian Ocean. The water below is dark and enormous, and the bioluminescent plankton near the surface, too small to see from this altitude, are making their cold blue light in the waves a phenomenon that has been happening in Earth's oceans for hundreds of millions of years. Tiny organisms producing light through chemistry the way fireflies do on a summer night, lighting up the water when disturbed, turning the wake of a ship into something ghostly and beautiful. Light made by living things, light that requires no fire, no electricity, no sun. Just a chemical reaction, luciferin and luciferase, an oxygen-driven process that releases energy as photons rather than heat, so efficient that almost none of the energy is wasted. Humans have been studying this process for decades and are only beginning to find applications for it, using the genes that code for bioluminescence to tag cancer cells, to mark proteins in living tissue, to make the invisible visible in ways that improve our understanding of how bodies work. The ocean makes its light, the station passes above, the sleeping crew dreams of grass and rain, the bacteria divide in their sealed chambers, the metal alloy continues its patient crystallization in the furnace. The fans hum, the batteries hold their charge, the gyroscopes spin, and somewhere in the sleeping module nearest the cupola, one astronaut is not quite fully asleep, is in that borderland between dreaming and waking where the mind is loose and images come freely, and the boundary between what is real and what is imagined becomes permeable, becomes interesting. She is not aware of being in this state. No one is ever aware of it from inside. But in that borderland, her mind is doing something that minds in that state often do. It is making connections, finding patterns, noticing the relationship between two things. That seemed unrelated in waking life. The brain in hypnagogia is a different instrument than the brain at a desk. More associative. More willing to let things touch that logic keeps apart. Some of the best scientific insights in history have come from this state. Kekel dreaming the ring structure of benzene, Mendeleev dreaming the periodic table. The mind, released from its daytime constraints and free to find the shape of things. She will not remember what she finds there tonight. She will wake in a few hours and know only that something shifted, that some problem she has been carrying feels lighter than it did yesterday, and she will not be able to say why. The borderland keeps its secrets. But the work was done, the connection was made. The mind, even sleeping, was doing what minds do when they are given space and dark and quiet, finding the pattern in the noise, finding the signal in the static of everything that presses in during the day and falls away at night, when the world goes quiet and the only thing left is the hum of the machine and the breathing of the person inside it, and outside the window the stars that have been there for billions of years and will be there long after every station and every satellite and every mark we have made on the sky has faded back into the dark. The stars do not need us to watch them. They burn regardless. They live their slow, enormous lives, millions of years for the large ones, billions for the small red dwarfs that barely flicker, outlasting everything, and they do not require witnesses. But we are witnesses anyway. We watch and we name and we measure and we ask. And the asking is its own answer, or the beginning of one. The station loops again. The sun rises for the 14th time in this day that has no real end. The porthole covers keep the light out. The sleep masks hold. The slow waves move through resting brains. The planet below keeps doing what it has always done, turning quietly through the dark, lit on one side, shadowed on the other, always both at once, like everything that has ever been alive. The waves move slower now, not the waves outside, not the ocean waves far below, or the electromagnetic waves the station's antenna arrays send and receive in their constant conversation with the ground. The waves inside, the slow electrical rhythms rolling through the sleeping brain, longer and deeper than the waves of waking, the architecture of rest settling into its quietest configuration. Delta waves, the deepest sleep, the place where the mind goes when it has finally let go of the day, when the last fragment of thought has dissolved, when there is nothing left to hold and so nothing is held. The station is quieter at this hour, not because the machines have slowed, they have not, they cannot, but because something about this part of the night carries its own specific weight. The crew has been asleep long enough that the restlessness of early sleep is gone. The dreaming is deeper now, the breathing is slower. The module is warm and dark, and the hum of the fans is so familiar it is no longer a sound, just a presence, like the sound of your own heartbeat, which you only notice when it changes. 14 orbits completed today. The 15th is underway. Below, the Pacific is vast and unreadable, a darkness so large it looks from orbit like the planet is mostly shadow, which in a sense it is. Most of the Earth's surface is ocean, and most of the ocean is deep, and most of the deep is cold and dark and unexplored. We have mapped the surface of the moon in greater detail than we have mapped the floor of our own oceans. The seafloor has mountain ranges taller than the Himalayas and trenches deep enough to swallow Everest with room to spare, and most of it has never been seen by human eyes. The Mariana Trench. The deepest known point in any ocean, nearly 11 kilometers down, where the pressure is 1,000 times the pressure at the surface, where the temperature hovers just above freezing, where no sunlight has ever reached. And yet life is there. Not sparse life, abundant life, adapted so completely to the darkness and the pressure that it cannot survive anywhere else. Creatures that have spent millions of years in conditions that would kill anything from the surface in seconds, that have restructured their biochemistry around the very pressure, that would crush us, that have found ways to eat and reproduce and navigate in absolute darkness. Life does not wait for comfortable conditions. Life finds conditions and makes them comfortable. That is the story of every extreme environment on Earth. The boiling vents of hydrothermal systems on the ocean floor, where bacteria thrive in water hot enough to melt lead. The dry valleys of Antarctica, where certain organisms live inside translucent rocks, using the stone as a greenhouse to trap just enough heat to stay alive. The clouds of Venus's upper atmosphere, which some researchers have proposed as a possible habitat for microbial life, floating in the only layer of that hellish planet where temperatures are. Almost hospitable. If life can do what it does in the Mariana Trench, if it can do what it does inside Antarctic rocks, then the question of whether life exists elsewhere in the universe stops, being a matter of whether the conditions are right, and starts being a matter of when we find it. Not if. The biologists who study extremophiles, the lovers of extreme conditions, which is what the name means, have quietly shifted the conversation in the last 20 years from can. Life exists elsewhere to where is it, and why haven't we found it yet? Europa. One of Jupiter's moons, a world covered entirely in ice, the surface cracked and ridged and strange, like a frozen ocean that has been stirred from below and then locked in place. Below the ice, potentially dozens of kilometers below the surface, there is liquid water. A global ocean, larger by volume than all of Earth's oceans combined, kept liquid not by sunlight but by tidal heating, the gravitational push and pull of Jupiter's enormous mass. Flexing Europa's interior, generating heat through friction, keeping the water liquid in a place where the sun is only a bright star, and the surface temperature is -1. 170 degrees Celsius. Liquid water. Heat. Chemistry, the three things that seem to be required for life as we understand it, all present in the dark below the ice of a moon 480 million miles from where you are. Lying right now. A mission is being planned, has been planned and replanned for years, the way important things often are, not out of indecision, but out of the difficulty of the engineering, the weight of what is at stake, the desire to get it exactly right before spending a decade in transit only to arrive with the wrong instruments. The spacecraft will take years to reach Jupiter. It will orbit Europa. It will study the ice. It will look for signs of the plumes of water vapour that have been tentatively detected erupting from the surface, ocean water venting into space, and if those plumes are confirmed, it may fly through them directly and taste what the ocean contains, analysing the chemistry of an alien sea from samples that the sea has sent up to meet it. What it finds, or does not find, will be one of the most significant discoveries in the history of science. If it finds evidence of life, even microbial life, even the chemical signatures of biology rather than biology itself, the implications are almost beyond articulation, because a second origin of life, life that arose independently, in a different ocean, under different conditions, on a different world, would mean that life is not a miracle of. extraordinary luck confined to one blue speck. It would mean that life is what the universe does when the conditions allow. It would mean that the galaxy is full of it, waiting to be found, and we are not alone in the way that we have sometimes feared we might be alone, which is entirely and finally, and without exception. If it finds nothing, that too is an answer. A harder answer. A lonelier answer, but an answer, and science requires all answers equally. Requires the willingness to go and look and accept what the looking reveals, even when what it reveals is silence. The station carries a small but significant piece of this inquiry. The instruments monitoring Earth's atmosphere from above contribute to the models used to understand atmospheric chemistry on other worlds. The biology experiments inform the theories of what life requires and what it can do without. The materials science research pushes the engineering that will build the next generation of spacecraft. Nothing on the station is unconnected to everything else. That is the nature of science. It is not a collection of separate subjects but a single conversation, carried on in many rooms at once, and what is said in one room eventually reaches the others. The crew sleeps through the conversation. The conversation continues without them. The data streams down to the ground, where people in those rooms are already awake, different time zones, different shifts, reading what the night has produced, noting what changed and what held steady, writing the next day's procedures and observations, keeping the conversation going in the dark. In Houston it is evening. The flight controllers on console are finishing their shift. The incoming controllers are reading the handover notes, scanning the telemetry, absorbing the status of the station the way you absorb the status of a house you have just walked. Back into looking for what is different, listening for the sounds that should be there and the sounds that should not. The station is theirs too, in a sense. They have spent more cumulative hours watching over it than any single astronaut who has lived inside it. They know its rhythms. They know the normal hum from the unusual one. They hold it from below the way gravity holds an orbit, invisibly, constantly, by the force of attention. Someone is eating dinner at a console, a sandwich probably, or something from the vending machines down the hall, because mission control is not a place where you leave during a shift. The food is beside the keyboard. The data is on the screen. The station is passing over the dateline, which is an imaginary line on the ocean where one calendar day becomes the next, a human convention drawn on a planet that has no use. For calendars, a line that means everything to the people who live by it, and nothing at all to the ocean below. The ocean does not know what day it is. The storm gathering in the southern Pacific does not know. The bioluminescent plankton do not know. The bacteria in the station's science module do not know. Only we keep track of days. Only we have decided that the turning of the Earth requires accounting, requires marking, requires the regular declaration of a new beginning. There is something quietly beautiful about that, about the human insistence on beginnings, on the idea that each rotation of the planet is a fresh chapter, that the sun rising tomorrow morning is not simply the sun that set tonight, but a new sun in some important sense. A sun that brings with it the possibility of things being different. It is not literally true. The sun is the same, the planet is the same, you are nearly the same. But the marking of time is not about the literal truth. It is about the attention it focuses on the present, the way a frame on a painting focuses attention on what is inside it. The frame is not the painting, but without the frame you might walk past. You have not walked past tonight. You are here. Still here, in this particular moment, this particular darkness, this particular quiet. The station is somewhere over the Pacific. The crew is deep in their slow wave rest, the deepest hour of the night, the part of sleep that no amount of coffee or willpower can fully replace if it is lost. The part the brain guards most carefully, the part that restores what the day spent. The slow waves roll through in long rhythms. The muscles are at their most relaxed. The body temperature has dropped slightly, as it always does in deep sleep, the metabolism quieting, the systems that run the body shifting into their maintenance mode, doing the repairs that can only be done when the owner is not using the equipment. A long-duration mission changes a body measurably. After 6 months in orbit, an astronaut's bone density has decreased by roughly 1% per month in the weight-bearing bones. The spine, the hips, the legs, their muscle mass has declined, particularly in the legs and lower back, which on Earth are constantly working against gravity and in orbit have almost nothing to do. Their cardiovascular fitness has changed because the heart on Earth works harder than the heart in space, pumping against gravity, and a heart that stops being challenged begins. To adapt to its easier life, becoming slightly smaller, slightly less powerful, in ways that require months of rehabilitation after return. The rehabilitation begins the moment they land, the moment the hatch opens and the outside air enters, which astronauts describe as one of the most overwhelming sensory experiences of their lives. The smell of actual, unprocessed air, of grass or tarmac or whatever the landing site holds, after months of recycled filtered station air, the rehabilitation begins. The body begins the work of remembering what it is. Gravity presses back down. The spine compresses. The inner ear recalibrates. The legs, unused to bearing weight, tremble. Most of them cry when they land. Not from sadness, not entirely from joy. From something that does not have a clean name, the feeling of return, of reunion, of the body being given back its familiar world, the way a sound heard from very far away, becomes suddenly loud and clear when the last distance closes. They put their hands on the ground. They let the earth hold them. And the earth, indifferent as always, does. The dream that is moving through the sleeping crew now, not the same dream, each of them separate in their own sleep, may contain the earth, may contain the grass and the rain and the smell of real air, may contain faces, voices, the specific weight of someone's hand. The sleeping brain is generous with these things. It returns what the waking hours have set aside. It finds the important things and brings them back in the dark, not as consolation exactly, but as reminder. As evidence, as proof that the distance between where you are and where you love is not as large as the kilometers suggest. 400 kilometers. The distance from one city to another. A few hours by train. A morning's drive. In the ordinary geography of a life on Earth, it is nothing. Barely a journey. But those 400 kilometers are vertical, which changes everything, which puts you outside the atmosphere, which puts you in orbit, which means that the distance between. The crew and the people they love is not measured in kilometers at all, but in the physics of re-entry, the heat shield and the parachutes and the landing and the rehabilitation.
And the months of waiting before the body is ready to come home. And still they go. Still they fill out the applications and train for the years and ride the rocket. Because the going matters. Because the view from up there changes something that cannot be changed from down here.
Because knowledge requires proximity. Because some things can only be learned from inside them. The station turns. The earth turns. The night deepens in the direction of morning the way all nights do, not by stopping, but by continuing until the stopping becomes unnecessary, until the dark has done its work and the light can return. And return it will, as it always has, as it always will, for as long as the sun burns and the planet turns, and there is someone here to notice. The slow waves move through resting minds. The hum holds steady. The porthole looks out at the same stars it has always looked at, and the stars look back, and between them the silence is complete, and the silence is enough. And somewhere in, the deep middle of the night, a sleeping hand opens slightly, fingers loose, palm facing nothing, open the way things are open when they are not waiting for anything, when they are simply at rest. The stars are still there. They were there before the station, before the rockets, before the first human eyes looked up and wondered what they were. They will be there long after the last antenna has gone quiet and the last orbit has decayed, and whatever comes after us looks up at the same sky and feels the same pull toward the dark between the lights. The station drifts into its 16th sunrise. This one no one sees. The porthole covers hold. The sleep masks hold. The slow waves are beginning their gradual return toward lighter sleep now, the brain moving up through its depths, the way a diver moves toward the surface, unhurried, following. The natural gradient, letting the pressure change slowly enough that nothing is disturbed. The deep work is done. The memories are filed. The repairs are made. The body has spent its night the way it was always meant to spend it. In the dark, at rest, surrendered to the process that 400 million years of evolution designed for. Exactly this. The fans hum. The gyroscopes hold the station's orientation with their patient spinning. The solar panels have caught the new light and are already feeding it back into the batteries. Somewhere in the science module the bacteria have divided again. The metal alloy has grown another layer of crystals in its careful furnace. The atmospheric instrument has recorded another hour of data that no one will fully interpret for years. The station does not sleep, but the people inside it do, and their sleeping is as much a part of the mission as anything else, as essential as the experiments, as deliberate as the orbital burns, as carefully managed as every other system on board. Rest is not the absence of work. Rest is the work that makes all other work possible. The earth below is moving into morning on its eastern edges. The light is crossing the Himalayas now, touching the highest peaks first. The way light always reaches the highest things before it reaches the valleys. The mountains catching the sun while the cities below them are still dark. The snow on the high slopes turning from grey to gold to white, the colour shifting with the angle, the ancient ice holding its light for a moment before sending it back. The light moves west. It will cross everything eventually. It always does. In the sleeping module closest to the cupola, the astronaut who is in the borderland is moving upward now into lighter sleep, into the strange half-world before waking where the dreams are thin and the sounds of the station begin to filter back in. The hum. The faint click of a thermal expansion somewhere in the hull. The soft processed sound of her own breathing recycled through the ventilation. She is almost awake. Not yet. There is still a little time. The night has one more loop to give. The station one more arc across the dark side before the schedule calls the crew back to the light. The clocks are counting. The procedures are waiting. The next day of science is already planned, already filed, already sitting in the queue. But that is later. Right now there is only this. The hum and the dark and the slow return from wherever sleep goes. The body warm inside the bag, the arms floating slightly forward. As they always do, as they have for months now, the body's learnt posture in this place, the natural shape of a person who has made there, peace with weightlessness. The station crosses the terminator one more time. Day and night at once. For just a moment. The hull lit on one side, dark on the other. The solar panels beginning their slow rotation toward the new sun. Then full light. Quiet and complete. The fans hum. The stars on the night side fade. The earth below rolls on in its turning, patient and blue and enormous, holding everything it has always held. And sleep moves through the station like a tide going out, slowly, without drama, leaving the shore a little quieter, a little cleaner, ready for what the morning will bring. Tonight you travelled. You went all the way up, all the way to the edge of the sky, and looked down at the world you live in from the only distance that lets you see it whole. Tomorrow night, the station will still be there, circling overhead, and there will be more to find, deeper in the solar system, further out among the planets, into the dark where. The questions are older, and the answers are still waiting to be named. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, the journey is complete. The stars are holding their light. The earth is turning, and somewhere above you, right now, someone is sleeping in the quiet of orbit, dreaming of grass and rain, while the universe continues its patient and endless work all around. Them.